a hang or not? It probably is, but which one? There may be many instances of it. And I had been doing this before the beta. I thought everything worked quite well. But you won't believe how many Star Wars nerds there are out there. It's just incredible. So this became the largest beta that EA had ever had. We had like over 10 million users, and they were playing it. So if you have a hang, say every 1,000 hours, okay, but there was 1 million users, and they were playing lots and lots and lots of hours, I got lots of dumps. So analyzing this by hand was not an option. But we have WinDbg and CDB. Excellent. So WinDbg and CDB are two. One is a graphical user interface on top of a debugger DLL, and the other is a command line interface on top of the same DLL. So there is an SDK to use to program against the debuggers. They are command line oriented. It means you type in the commands you want and you get text output. They are kind of arcane, but powerful. And the nice thing is that it has this extension model and a scripting language, so I should be good to go. This is what scripting in that scripting language looks like. Okay. There are no variables, by the way. But you have this alias set, AS, and that will be evaluated if you have a block after it. I am nowhere near enough smart enough to be using this. I've tried really hard, and I went to the documentation and I read it, and as soon as I think I understand that, I've forgotten the problem I was trying to solve, and then I go back and forth, and it's like we'll have a look. If I can get in and out of this. I should stop by looking at what we're going to do. And why is anybody who knows this? Windows P and duplicera. Hey. Okay, so first of all, we have a small Invoke debugger helper, because the command lines for those debuggers are about as complicated and rich as the scripting language. So I wrap this in Invoke debugger or debug, so that I can say, like I want to debug this dump. And I want to execute the command reload f kplmdvq. I said it was kind of arcane, right? And when we do that, can I have smaller font? Do you see in the back? So this did what I asked it to do. It reloaded my symbols. It did a KP, it did an LM, and it did a DV and a Q. So next I debug Notepad. Just an explanation. LM, obvious list modules. KP, obvious display call stack. Or not. DV, display variable, you see, it's completely inconsistent. I have no idea why they choose K and KP for call stack. But there is a K in there, but Q is for quit. And in this, I'm using the script file gm when I'm doing this debugging, and says put a breakpoint BP on this function. When it's hit, go up and run this script. Okay? That script looks like this. And $$ is a comment, by the way. So it says set a pseudo register to the value that is at the stack pointer minus 59 plus 18, etc. And I check for some stuff and I print X and Y. This enables me to, when I put my mouse over Notepad here, can you see what it does? So I'm checking for when we get the mouse move message and print the X and Y coordinates. So it's really powerful debuggers. Horrible user interface, but powerful. So just to like, how do you know what to put here? If you set the breakpoint just at user 32 get message wide. Thanks. And I say go. And the debugger stopped here. Then I can say disassemble at the point of the instruction pointer. I had a Swedish there. At $instruction pointer, and show me a bit backwards here. I see the call to. Oh, sorry. I must do a go up first, like go out of the function that called me. So I'm now looking at after the call to user 32 get message. We skip that. What I did see when I am at the, we can see where I am. Go up. UB, back. Before the call here, this is the x64 calling convention. The first parameter is passed in RCX, and that is the address of the message, which is the call stack and offset 59. Is anyone know what I'm talking about here? Okay, so this is just the instructions that the machine are using. We are like, this is what the processor executes step by step. It's a disassemble, it's a assembler, yes. This is x64 assembler. But by looking at what the machine is actually doing, I can find out where it put the parameters before making the function call. And then I can go inspect them afterwards and see when the call is done. Take a look at that memory and show me what it is. So that is just a quick view of WinDbg, and they are called low-level debuggers for a reason. But in WinDbg, you can actually get source code in a window, so it's not all hopeless. Yeah, areas. We looked at that. So, to hook into this, how many know about what a DLL export is? Okay, so the mechanics of, you know that Windows have a lot of files in the system32 directory called .dll. It's a dynamic link library, which means a package of code that the debugger can, a process can load, and it has exported functions. Those exported functions are the methods that you can call from the outside. So think of it as like public methods public static methods of an assembly. And WinDbg's extension model is that if you export those functions, debug, initialize, extension initialize, and uninitialize, and something, this is just syntax for something that takes in a debug client, then that function can be called by WinDbg by entering exclamation point and the name of the function, and then a string parameter. Really low level, but still something we can work with. These are traditionally written in C and C++, and that's also how I started doing this, because that's the only way I knew how to do it. As a side note, here's what Bjarne Strostrup, the creator of C++, says about C++. Trust the programmer, you don't have to pay for something you don't need, don't break existing code, like from old C, and prefer compile time errors over runtime errors. Can you see the fundamental flaw?
I don't think it helps when you think you're using PowerShell with a Windows API. The Windows API has to call this function. So who's using Windows API with PowerShell? Okay.
Like directly calling Win32 APIs from
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's similar.
Well, have you seen in PowerShell when you do add type and you can write some C# code and say DLL import? That's just a way of calling. So if you wrote that with the names of the functions I mentioned earlier, you could call into my DLL. You would crash and burn, but you could call it. But this trust the programmer. You should never ever trust a programmer. It's just don't. And everybody who's programming knows this. And it's just like show them code they wrote like 5 years ago, and they will invariably say, what kind of monkey wrote this? And they will deny it was them until you prove it, like source control blame. No, it wasn't me. It wasn't me.
Like 4-5 weeks ago. Yeah, exactly.
So what happened is that I started out writing this in a combination of C++, C++ CLI, like the managed abhorrence of C++, and C#, which is naturally more complex than you would want it to be. And then enters Robert Giseke. I have never met him, but I like him more than my wife right now. And he's like between my children and my wife on my top list. He's written a NuGet package called unmanaged exports, which allows you to, in C# write an attribute on your methods, and then he rewrites your assembly and adds a native piece of code that makes it possible for you to call directly from native code into C# code without any interop, like the inverse of DLL import. I was extremely happy when I found that. So, PSX, what I did was I used Robert's stuff and the Debugger's extension model and PowerShell's hosting to do this. Have anybody tried, hands up, who have tried hosting PowerShell? Good, a few. How did you like it?
It's fairly easy API to work with.
Yeah, not that bad. And I don't know this shit that good, so I downloaded sample hosts 06 and started modifying to make it work. I set up a run space to run these things in, and a host to provide the communication. So the host is basically when I want to output something. And in WinDbg, I have to go through the debugger's output APIs. When I'm in the host in console, in CDB, I can use the C# console classes, which is richer and easier. So I can do more things when I'm in CDB than in WinDbg, but I can live with that. Let's see if I can get. I should go back to, yeah. There are smarter ways of doing this, I'm sure. Yeah, so this is kind of a high-level view of what's going on. The debug commandlets are, this is kind of meta, because we're in a debugger that is loading a DLL into itself, and then that DLL is loading system management automation, which it's in its turn calls back into the DLL that loaded it and loads commandlets. So it's kind of complicated to keep all these things apart. I've abstracted this under an interface called, or the debugger functionality under something called a debugger. I have to have something called the debugger proxy, because one of the rules of the debugger engine is that it can only be called on the same thread that initialized your extension. And PowerShell creates a new thread when you host it. When you create a run space, it runs in their own thread, and I can control that. So in some way, I have to like package every method call I do from PowerShell into like a little box, and then on the other side, I have to look at that box and see what does PowerShell want me to do, and then give it back to the thread that I got from the debugger and say, hey, please do this for me. So that is the role of this debugger proxy, which the debugger proxy is packaging the method calls and give it to the dispatcher that unpacks it and delegates it to the debugger. And then I have a debugger class that just provides high-level operations for that I can say get call stack instead of having. It often translates to multiple API calls down to the debugger. So this is kind of an attempt to describe the green stuff is the debugger thread, the arrows. The red stuff is the PowerShell thread. So if we just follow when I say like try to get the call stack, I get into PowerShells, begin invoke, I think it's called, and then PowerShell loads my commandlet and call process record on it, which goes down into the debugger proxy, get call stack, which puts it to the dispatcher, who then calls the debugger, get call stack, which goes back into the debugger, and back through my debugger, who packaged the results in a nice way and put it in the box in the dispatcher. And the debugger proxy is then unpacking this and just returning it back to my commandlet. And my commandlet is using write object, which goes down to my host, which goes in. This is for the WinDbg case. Then I have to go the same way back to get output in WinDbg. In the console case, I can just directly output to the console there. So it's a bit faster, and I can do colors, and it's better. Anyone, Anders, is anything clear at this moment? For some, I will try harder. when we leave here, nothing should be clear. So let's have a small look then at I see, X. Yeah. Okay, so this is just invoking it, and let's see. This is doing basically the same thing, but do you notice a difference in output here? That it's kind of more structured, better aligned?
Could you pipe that to a preview? So you got a graphical debugging for instance.
I'll take this in steps, but that's a good. I haven't tried, but why shouldn't we try? The thing is, if I write like this, bang they call exclamation mark bang. I don't know why, but bang PS. That says to the debugger, when you interpret this command line, call the debugger extension that I loaded when I started the debugger, and call the PS method there. And when you do it, give it the command K. I provided alias here, for K for as in call stack. But I can now say, did I get Swedish? No. All. Show me all threads. Or just the current thread. So now I'm like in the PowerShell world. Right? And I can do things like $x equals 1. And then I can ask for $x, and it says 1. So I have this session going where I can say bang PSLS, and like we have a scripting language. But when I hit tab, who is interpreting this? I'm still in the debugger.
The debugger,
Yeah.
So basically you got a wrapper for the shitty WinDbg commands.
Exactly.
PowerShell.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And back again.
For memory dump debugging, of course.
But going interactive? Anybody recognizes the fabulous work of Jason Shirk and PS Readline? So once I realized that I was focused on WinDbg in the beginning, and that limited how I thought about the problem. And when I like started thinking, well, maybe I should go with CDB instead, which has another advantage, and that is when you have really, really many dumps to process, and you think maybe I should go parallel with this. I have a talk tomorrow about parallelizing PowerShell. If you open a new window, every time you do a dump and you're debugging 16 dumps in parallel, you get lots of windows on your screen, and trying to do something else is really, really hard because they keep popping up and stealing focus. So that made me realize that CDB is a good way to go. And then I could do REPL. So here we have the full ls recurse or klm is a good thing. And does it take any exclude? I don't want to see anything with bcrypt. So bcrypt is gone. And this, like now, all of a sudden, if I want to get data out of the debugger, I can say convert to these. Thank you. Scream when you see me mistype. JSON pipe set content a dot JSON. gc hey.json, and we're so now I have a real easy way of going back and forth, and I can say set. Oh, I'm out of the bang ps1.
With the PSI.
I'm so glad you're here. Because when you don't remember, set get message breakpoint. Oh, I'm debugging a dump right now. So exit, quit, debug, and that's the cool thing when you have. If I have type dump here, if I want to find my dumps, tab completion, find all the dumps on the system. I'm going to show you search everything if we got time. That's actually really cool. But I want to debug Notepad. And I want to do this PSI set get message breakpoint. And when we look at this with this breakpoints, it says I have a command that says go up and do bang ps show mouse chord. And now I have functions. I can call functions from other functions, and life is so much better now. If you don't really like as/whatever and .block and whatever to get the kind of meta pseudo variable set and whatnot. So we do exit. This is the only, what I've noticed is going back and forth. I can never remember if I'm in the debugger or in the interactive extensions read, like you have a multiple read line. I tried to solve it with a different prompt, but it doesn't work on me. So now we have the same stuff, but executed in PowerShell.
And with decimals instead of hex.
And if we look at that, somewhere in my console psx profile, because naturally you would want to be able to add stuff that is always in your session. And here I can invoke a debugger expression, give me the place where the message ID of the get message call is. It's hex 200 for mouse move. And I read to a place in memory, and then I use PowerShell to get the high word and the low word. High word and low word is like if you have a bucket of 32 bits, it's the upper 16 or the lower 16. And then I just output them. And in the debugger, I often want to do, like, if I get, this is something I would try, if anybody have a great idea, how to being able to change if I want to see integers output as hex, like hexadecimal or decimal in PowerShell. It would be cool to be able to do this dynamically, going back and forth. What I want to try, Tobias suggested that you could try adding a script method to in32 and override toString, and change that depending on if you want the because in the debugger, if I say like what is RCX, and it evaluates this and outputs it, in this case in both. Maybe I should do that. There's a lot of room for improvements, at least. How many of you guys are writing C# code? A few, yeah. Well, do you have any questions so far? So I'm going to start at the Debugger extension. And showing you, this is what Mr. Giseke gave me, the DLL export. So here is where I like fulfill the contract towards the Windows debugger. I can initialize, I can uninitialize, and I have the PS and the PSI, PS interactive exports. And then I check if I can run interactive or not. So WinDbg will return false, and I can provide an error and say, you can't do this. And in the other case, I just go to my session, which I create in initialize. So initialize sets up my stuff, and then I get this client. Client is a raw pointer to the COM interface iDebug client that the debugger uses to. That's like the entry point you get. Then you have to query that for all other kinds of functionality you want. And there are a lot of these. So this is like the interface to the debugger. It's a really rich interface, but it's somewhat cumbersome to or maybe it's just like, maybe it's good when you get used to it. So this is. Let me be clear. I am in no way a professional in this area. It's just me scratching my itches. So trying to find ways around the problems I get in everyday life, mostly work life. Okay, so we get to the session. The session is where we do the. You see, I'm setting up my session state, my initial session state for PowerShell. And I add a variable called debugger to the state, so I can get, if I want to write scripts and get access to stuff that I haven't yet written commandlets around, I may be able to do stuff from the scripts. And this is the cool stuff where I add my module, and the module is myself. Like the DLL that is executing is the module that I tell PowerShell to load commandlets from. So this is where we go. Are you following me? Yeah. I add types and formats to be able, otherwise the output looks shitty. And I extend uint64, which is the type that the debugger is using to show addresses, to display them the same way as the native debugger does, with a little tick after 8 digits. And then I create the run space, and off we go. And when we invoke this, there's this little trick of getting to another thread to do the execution, and then I wait while dispatching method calls. You remember this slide with the red and blue thread? So this is like keep looking in the box for new things to do, and when you do them, go up. And in the invoke script variant, or when I just do this with bang PS, I just exit as soon as I'm done. I'm running my command and exiting. But with when I'm in the console session knows that, first of all, I'm adding stuff to history, but I'm writing the prompt, I'm calling readline, and then I invoke the script that readline returns. And the only thing is that getPrompt invokes the prompt script, And I'm pretending to be the PS console host to make Jason believe that I'm actually the console and not the debugger. And it's actually I'm faking this. So I'm adding a function here saying this is PS console host readline, which is the function that he overrides. And if it's not there, I'm going to call my own readline implementation, which is nowhere near as fancy as PS readline. And otherwise, yeah, I can use the full Monty. Here's an example of a command. This is like the what do you say, escape hatch for everything that I haven't wrapped. I can just delegate the same command that I would write in the debugger, but now I get the output through PowerShell. Like if I want to do parsing of something that I haven't wrapped yet. So eventually the goal would be that I would never have to use this. That will never happen, but that would be good. The proxy is one of the, this is, you remember when I said never ever trust a programmer? And when I get back to this in a few years, I will invariably ask, what the fuck was he thinking? Because this is, sorry for the bad language, but if you look at this, I'm just delegating to a proxy. But the proxy is a dynamic. So C# made a keyword dynamic to make it easier to implement dynamic languages like Python and Ruby on .NET. And what it basically does is create, in this case, I have overridden a method of like the dynamic infrastructure that calls, that does reflection on what is being called, like you get the method name, get the parameters, put them in this box. And put it in the dispatcher input box. Invoke that stuff and return the result. And the last piece of this, after the proxy has unpacked this, is that you get into the debugger, and if you can look at something, here you have to care about, you see, what's the size of the native structure of a module, convert those bytes that I get from some API into some .NET type, like a lot of shuffling bits back and forth from a native format and into something that the .NET runtime understands and PowerShell understands. And that's about it. Anybody who's still not confused? Any questions?
How did you actually use it?
Sorry?
How did you actually use it?
The thing is, I haven't used this. I will. So, if you go back a few months to September, and I'm sitting there with thousands of crash dumps, I have the options of really fast getting something going, and delivering results to the people who are paying my salary, or saying, can you give me 5 months, because I would go off and try to write a host here for PowerShell to host in WinDbg. Doesn't that? No. But I felt the pain of scripting this in the tools available in the native debuggers. So I ended up opening a log file, executing some commands, parsing that text afterwards with PowerShell to like get some structured data from this. But there will be other betas, and there will be a second version of Battlefront.
So I guess you already used it and saw it was useful, so that's why you're looking forward to use it more.
Yes, but I didn't have those pieces of the puzzles then. But I thought that shouldn't this be doable? And I thought the answer is clear now. I think it is. It is doable. You can do it. It actually seems to work fairly well. Another interesting thing that I like. This is a journey. I started off thinking I will have to do this in C++, and thought that maybe I will have to like host the .NET runtime and go like you can go from so many directions. And tell .NET runtime to load PowerShell and I don't know, and then I got to manage C++ and I have to write the command that's there. Or maybe I can do some tricks here and load the C# assembly into this manage or manage C++. And then this Robert Gisecki entered and like. So now I realize that there's also an export in the debug engine DLL, the debugger DLL, that says debug create. So I can from PowerShell directly just say, okay, but create a debugger, attach to this host or to this process or open this dump and skip all those proxy. Like both scenarios are valuable because sometimes you want to be in the debugger for other reasons. Or it's just stuff you haven't yet written accessors for in PowerShell. So both are valuable, but from a scripting perspective, the next endeavor is doing this the other way around. Like maybe like thinking of it as remoting. You do a new PS session to this computer, and then you execute those commands against that computer. And you can think of the same way. A new debugging session, and then you execute these commands against that session and get outputs, or you can do enter debugging session and get the direct interactive without having to pass the session along. But as you see, I have almost no clue what I'm doing. I'm like, yes.
Do you know Dan Thompson at Microsoft?
No.
You're going to have to know Dan Thompson. He's been hacking on WinDbg for about 2 years with PowerShell. So you guys totally got to meet him.
He's doing it a different way, right? Like he's in the
Maybe?
yeah. You take both
Yeah,
versions.
let the forces come together.
That will be, like I would gladly. Can you put us in contact in any way?
So, you mentioned that you had to extend the unsigned 64-bit integer type of .NET in order to like make it work properly.
And I did like this. So you remember I loaded types?
Okay, so it's only display formatting because my
No. This is not format. This is types. Formats are here. These are like the table view and stuff.
Okay.
But this is how you can extend the type system and add the types. And I'm saying on all UN64. Then I have implemented to display address on PSX format class. I have a to display address which takes in a PS object and converts it. All those has to take in a PS object, and then just do toString on it.
But, so my next question is, does it work with the 32-bit version of?
No, I have explicitly said like this is hard enough as it is. You're welcome to I accept change requests, but most of the stuff should not be. I haven't tried. When I compile the extension, I explicitly compile it as x64, and I think that is a requirement from this unmanaged exports, because the PE header of the binary is different on x64 and Win32. But I could probably just recompile this as 32-bit, and use it on the 32
The
big
thing is with
debuggers.
the marshalling of 60.
The debugger always, all addresses, both from Windows, Win32 processes and x64 processes, will always be in 64-bit to make the extension developers' life a little more painful. Less painful. Less painful. It's painful enough as it is. Yeah.
Are you going to publish that?
It's on.
Or did you already?
Let's. And I said. No, but that should be good enough. And now I learned a trick. Without stepping, did you know that in PowerShell you can go directly? You hit G and go directly to the slide instead of stepping through all of them? I'm a trained professional. Don't try this at home, kids. What have we looked at? We have looked at a lot of messy things. We have looked at extensions for debuggers. We have looked at quickly at hosting PowerShell and the session, how you set up a run space, a simple REPL and how we call the prompt, the ugliness of marshalling method calls between like, I don't expect any of you to remember or understand what this was. I don't. And I will definitely not in a few years. I didn't write that. Which is true for all the parts I stole. Shamelessly from... yeah, I will get to that in this place. The new Microsoft, who publishes source on GitHub, is where I got all the definitions for the debugger engine interfaces. I would never have embarked on this if that hadn't been there. It's just too much work. But when I saw that, that changed like the direction of my thoughts. And well, hey, maybe I could do this. So I just stumbled across them when I was fiddling around doing some other stuff. And Robert can see. If he's gay, I'm available. And the PowerShell sample SDK is like 90% of the stuff of the hosting is just adapted from that with a few minor tweaks where it needs to be. So it's so cool that we have all the source code available. That's like my call to action. If you're doing stuff, create a GitHub account and publish it. You never know who will stumble upon what you did and find, wow, I can extend this and maybe contribute back. And like you get a really good, not a vicious, what's the opposite of a beneficial, sir? What do you call that? Virtuous cycle, yeah, going. So and we're at the next steps. I don't even think you have 15 minutes. Maybe you have. How long do you have? Somewhere. Now, you can ask questions.
I think you might be able to simplify your dispatcher stuff a little bit if you were to use synchronization context. Have you seen synchronization?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because you're sort of like...
I'm capturing the context, and I should maybe just be able to invoke directly to it.
Yeah, you're emulating that because you're basically running a task, and then you're like listening for, or you're dispatching things while you're waiting for the task to come back, which is basically what async does.
This is actually something that I've been thinking about in another context the other way around, that I wrote a PowerShell synchronization context to be able to get back when I do parallel things from a commandlet, and then I have to do all the outputting on the PowerShell. So I want to capture that and loop through. It's just that, that was a few years ago when that monkey didn't write that code. So he didn't remember that he ever did it. But you're completely right. That's the right way to...
I'm doing a similar thing, actually, with PowerShell editor services, where I'm using synchronization context to dispatch things back to like to happen in an ordered way, but be able to sort of use a nice asynchronous.
Yes. Isn't this the greatest? Like when you're at a place like this and you show people stuff, and you can do this in this way. Oh yeah, you're right. It's just let's sit down afterwards and just look at like a better way of doing this.
I think you have a volunteer anyway.
Yeah.
I have enough work to do.
Yeah, what I was going to say. Think of this session more as, okay, now you've heard stuff. Some of it you may have never heard before, but now you have heard it, and you know that you can go back to this place on GitHub and look at the source code and steal the things you want. Everything I do is published with the most friendly license I can find, and if it isn't, it's because I didn't understand the licenses, which is also very possible. MIT is what I think it is. So feel happy to steal and modify and mutate and do what you like. I'm done. You're free to go. I'm amazed that so many showed up. I thought that this would be like...
So few fell asleep.
I